Good morning, everyone. I'm Joanna Goldfarb, the Youth Services and Sustainable Innovation Consultant at the Rambo-Catskill Library System. Thank you for joining today's workshop, The Art of Book Talking with Virtual Book Talks. This program is being recorded. Before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that you will have opportunities to ask questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to put those questions in the chat. Or if our workshop leader prompts you, you can unmute yourselves and ask the question out loud. Also, if you are interested in future workshops, please check the RCLS program calendar and feel free to sign up. Without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Joyce Leoza.
Hi, everyone. I love book talking, and I really feel that a lot of people are intimidated by it, although it sounds like RCLS has been really working towards virtual book talks, and some of you maybe even have started those. So some of you, for some of you, this may be a tune-up or just a few ideas of how you can move along your book talks and work in maybe perhaps better notes for yourselves, so it's not so hard to build a book talk. And virtual book talks, I'm going to mention them a few times, and there are some things that are specific to them. So, but this isn't really about filming, editing, or anything like that. It's more of the simple things that you can do to help yourself with virtual book talks. Okay, next. What is a book talk? Well, it's an advertisement. It's a commercial. Your aim is to create interest. It is not a review. It is not a book report. You want to build for your listeners characters, action, and tell them why they really want to read this book. So you have to keep remembering it's an advertisement or a commercial. Excitement. Okay. Next. So let's start off with a book talk. This is new this year, and I heard that one of the schools is talking about this, some of the BOCES. The Genius Under the Table by Eugene Yelchin. Now, if you were doing this from home, just as a quick aside, oh, I had two things here. You might want to prop this next to you, and here, move it into the frame, move yourself a little to the side, and you could actually do your book talk this way, not holding the book, having it up there on a stand or something so it's right next to your face. Doesn't have to be, because you have a slide. You can edit in pictures of books, book covers, so you don't have, it'll be you, it can be the book cover. You don't have to think about that. So I'm just going to do it this way. What was life like in the Soviet Union during the Cold War? I can't imagine it being funny. To me, it sounds like it would be very serious. I know it was a very hard life at that time. Why would you want to read about that? Well, Eugene Yelchin has written a memoir about growing up in the Soviet Union, and it includes drama, family secrets, and a KGB spy in his own kitchen. Yevgeny, which is Eugene's Russian name, lives in a cramped apartment with his mother, father, and brother. Space is so limited that his sleeping space is under a table. And the one and only pencil in the house at night is confiscated by Yevgeny so that he could draw on the underside of the table. Of course, any conversation at night is overheard by young Yevgeny. And they're all in the same room. What he hears most often is the worry his parents have for what will become of him. As far as they're concerned, you have to be a genius at something. His brother is a figure skater, and they envision him going on to the Olympics. His mother works at a ballet school. His father loves Russian poetry, but he doesn't seem to have any talent. And this book, that sounds kind of boring to me, but it isn't. It's really funny and filled with humor. And the very first chapter, which begins online to look at Lenin's body, which is in a glass case in Moscow in Red Square. So you stand in line with all of these people, and they slowly go forward to go into this mausoleum where you will walk by Lenin, who is the father of the Soviet Union and this revered figure in Russia. And that's what you do. You have to be quiet. You have to show respect. No hands in your pockets. There are military men with guns all around, and they are yelling at you if you do anything wrong. And he describes the scene, and it is truly wonderful. It may seem like an odd word to say wonderful about someone looking at a casket, but it is. And if you get through the first chapter, you won't be able to put the book down. So I highly recommend The Genius Under the Table. And Yelchin does his own illustrations, the cover, and you see pictures of his family, and his grandfather's face is cut out. I wonder why. You got to read the book to find out. So there we go, The Genius Under the Table. Next slide. You get to decide what to promote. New books, shelf sitters, themes. You might have a lot of things that book lists you've made, and you're making displays. So I was looking at this, and I was thinking, as I was picking out slides, one of the things that I fell in love was that there's just one word. And can you think about how many one-word book titles there are? Well, I immediately thought of one of my favorites, which is called Revolver. This is Revolver, next slide, by Marcus Sedgwick. Revolver, the first cover on the left is the hardcover, and the second cover, which has a menacing stranger, a stolen gold, and a loaded gun, is the paperback. This is historical fiction. It's considered historical fiction. Ignore that. Yes, it takes place after the Alaskan gold rush at the beginning of the 20th century. It takes place in a frozen climate, and so that's historical, but there's nothing that makes it historical fiction. What is this? It's a gripping thriller. Sig, S-I-G, that's a boy's name. His father has died, and his mother and sister have gone to town to get to help to either remove the body, because they can't really bury it, and what they're going to do with his father's body. So he's all alone in the house, and it's a shack. And a stranger comes to the door and demands the gold that his father has stolen. Demands the gold. And he says that if he doesn't get the gold, he's going to kill the boy. Now the boy, they're living in poverty. What gold? Where? He's never seen any gold. They don't have any gold. When the stranger realizes that his sister and mother are gone, he says if he doesn't get the gold, when they come back, he'll kill them. Sig knows that his father always had a revolver, and he knows where it is. But can he get to the revolver before the stranger kills him? And if he gets to it, can he shoot him? Revolver by Marcus Sedgwick. I have to tell you, I was disappointed when I went to get this book, just to look it over, and hardly anybody owned it. And the reason hardly anybody owned it is nobody's really read it. When I was in my library and I read it and loved it, I fell in love with the fact that it was only 167 pages. And I forgot to mention that, but I normally do in my book talk because it is such a fast read. And secondly, when you book talk, kids will take out the books. If you can make them exciting, this is your commercial, this is your opportunity, they will take them out. Next slide. All right, let's talk about how to prepare your own book talks. Choose a book you like. These are two new books this year, and I'm going to tell you straight out, I'm a Steve Sheinkin fan and love nonfiction. But I wanted to read Too Bright to See because it was on a lot of people's list. It was on the National Book Awards shortlist. It's being talked about Newbery. And so I read them both. Well, I'll never give a book talk for Too Bright to See. I didn't like the book. I really did not like the book. And when you don't like a book, it's very hard to do. Now, if you were perhaps asked to do a book talk on a certain list of books and you had to read them and you said, blah, 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 okay, how are you going to do this if you don't like it? Well, you look at reviews. These are some of the tricks of the trade. You look at reviews, you look at libraries that might have put it on a list, and you see what they say about it, and you try and pull out something that you think, yeah, okay, I can say that. Yeah, I can live with that. But Too Bright to See, if I didn't have to, I would never do that one. Fallout, on the other hand, oh my goodness, how I love this book. It's called, the subtitle is Spies, Super Bombs, and the Ultimate Cold War Showdown. What do you think is the scariest thing in the world today? If you had to think about it, what would it be? Would it be the pandemic? Or maybe terrorism? Or even school shootings? I think all of these are pretty scary. But in 1960s, especially 1962, the scariest thing was a real nuclear war at the top of everyone's list. And it was the Cuban Missile Crisis that was the one that brought us to that view. This book tells the story, the backstory of President Kennedy, Nikita Khrushchev, the premier of Soviet Union, a U-2 spy plane shot down in the Soviet Union, and the pilot, Francis Gary Powers, stuck in a Russian jail, a blockade to stop nuclear bombs from reaching Cuba, and a game of chicken that was too real back then. But this book starts out with the most incredible story of all. Anyway, I thought so. The very first chapter is about a paper boy. He's going to collect the money, his weekly money, and he lives in New York City, and he goes to an apartment on the 4th floor, 2 teachers, and they usually always give him a tip. So as he turns around to look at his tip, he drops the coins by accident. And so he's quickly trying to pick them up off the stairs. Only when he gets to the nickel, it's only half the nickel, and it's empty inside. So he's looking for the other piece of the nickel, and he finds it. And on that piece is a tiny piece of film inside that nickel. That is the beginning of Fallout. It's a rollicking ride and one well worth your time and effort. You won't believe it's nonfiction. Fallout by Steve Sheinkin. Next slide. How to prepare your own book talks, read the entire book. All right. Now, I just told you that if you did, I told you I didn't like Too Bright to See, so I had read the whole book. And I really feel you have to read the whole book. However, if you don't read the whole book, because maybe you really like it, or it's kind of boring, or maybe it's just such an easy read and you can figure out what's going to happen, you're kind of skimming it. That's fine. Or else it's on that list of we want you to book talk these books and you're running out of time. So you read the beginning and you read the end. Whatever, try and read the book. But word for word, paragraph for paragraph, okay, even I don't do that all the time. So truthfully, what I'm trying to get across is you got to know what's happening in the story. Next slide. Because this was a time when I read Black Beauty, or I should say, I never read Black Beauty, and I still haven't read Black Beauty. Luckily, this was an early librarian mistake, and it happened to a relative, so I don't feel too bad that I did this to any patron. My niece was a horse girl, loved horses, rode horses, and she was a great reader. So her mother was looking for any horse books she could, and I mentioned Black Beauty. Oh my gosh, what a mistake. I never read it. I didn't know Black Beauty died. I'd never seen any of the movies. To me, it was a classic book. Well, my niece cried and cried and cried over that book. Her mother was not too pleased with me. So that is why I encourage you to know the story and know where it's going and how it's going to end. Because we're not giving out the ends, but you may know, and you could even ask, well, how do you feel about animals? And of course, maybe they all love animals. And well, if an animal is hurt, how do you feel? Oh, I hate it. Well, okay, I guess Black Beauty is not the book for you. And I've never recommended it since. So that is why I say you really have to concentrate. Okay, next slide. All right, this is one that probably most of you don't do, or if you do, I'm so thrilled that you do it. And that is, you've got to take notes. This is a screenshot of my Excel spreadsheet. Now, I didn't always keep an Excel spreadsheet. I used to teach YA literature and children's literature at the University of Albany, and I always had to take notes, and I had a way for them to take notes. I still didn't always take my own notes. And I did keep notes on cards. I did keep lists of books, and I did keep some things, but nothing like this. I have grown into this. So I have title, authors, illustrators. I give not a summary so much as my opinion of what I saw, what I liked, what I didn't like. I have a star system. I only go from 1 to 3, whether it's at the library or I own it, or if I had an ARC, the genre, the year it's published, diversity, and then also I have publisher. People think, why would I even care about the publisher? Sometimes at the end of the year, I look down and see what I've read, a lot of the same publisher or who publishes good books or whatever, and the date I finished it. And of course, because it's an Excel spreadsheet, I can sort it. I can sort it for the best books, 3 stars. I can sort it by genre. I can sort it by author. I can do it any way I want, which I've done many times. So that's why I highly suggest it. And every year I start a new list. So I've already started my 2022 list because it's January. I highly, highly recommend it. When people ask you, and I've done this so many times, so what are you reading? You know what? I can't remember. Now, I only have this list on my home computer, so that really doesn't help me. But actually, when you write something down, you do remember like the last book you read, or whatever. So please, it's kind of important, especially if you want to do book talks. You've got everything there for you. You've got everything at your fingertips. You don't have to recreate the wheel for every book you read and try and remember it. And what was the point that you liked or didn't like? You have it all there. This is like the biggest takeaway. Please make notes. Next, write out your book talk and practice it. Now, you've got your notes in front of you, so you start figuring out how you want to do this and write it out. You list the important points or the characters or whatever you want to emphasize. You can write out the whole book talk, and frankly, I usually do, and then put a highlighter on it to remember, because you're not going to read it. You are going to look up and be as natural as possible. So sometimes I might forget words. That's why if you use a highlighter, it helps. What was that important word? If you practice it, and only a couple times, I'm talking once, twice, 3 times, that's fine. If you practice it and use a timer, then you know, okay, I've got to make this much shorter, or I'm saying way more than I wanted to, or my sentences aren't making sense. And you have to practice in front of a mirror. You have to know if you're looking up or looking down. If you, a lot of times with a book, I might put a Post-it note on the back and look at it. However, if I'm looking at this, first of all, my face is covered, which isn't good. Secondly, is as I'm looking down, I may be moving this down, and then my face is moving down, and I have to remember to keep looking up. Not a good scene. And lastly, if I'm holding the book in my hand, sometimes I might be talking too much and moving my hands in the excitement of the book. Practice in front of a mirror and practice your timing. Next slide. Now, if you can do this, if you want to make virtual book talks at home, and there's no reason not to. First of all, it's a good practice. Then you can actually rewind it, and not rewind it, but you know what I mean. Look at it and see where you're going right or wrong. Get a pair of googly eyes and make sure you put them on top of where the camera is filming you. You really need to do this so you remember to look. I have an iPad, and I'm not using an iPad now, but I know this, so I'm pointing to it, is the camera is on the side when I put it in the position I like it. I have to constantly look over, so I have to remember to look there. On the iPhone or my laptop, it's right here in front of me, so like that. You have to know where to look. So the googly eyes do help, and you don't really have to buy googly eyes, although they're very cheap. And you probably have them in your craft closets, but just put a piece of paper with eyes on it to remind you to look right at the camera. Next slide. Now, longer talks are perfect for teachers. And you may feel like, well, these book talks aren't going to be for teachers. Why not? Why not? Now, it doesn't mean that their kids can't look at them too. But if you make some longer ones, or if you let teachers know that you have some book talks specifically for them, and parents too, for parents that you want to share certain things that even read alouds, perfect for parents. So let people know that in the book talk. And a longer talk for Flora and Ulysses is something that I would go on like this. I mean, I happen to love this book, but it is a couple years old, more than a couple years old. And so you might not be doing this, but this is the type of thing you would say for teachers. Holy bagumba, a vacuum sucks up a squirrel outside. Comic book drawings are interspersed throughout this Newbery Medal winning book, and names, poetry, and the squirrel Ulysses infuse the story with compassion, hidden superpowers, and the definition of family. Kate Dicamillo, no stranger to Newbery winning books, honor for because of Winn-Dixie and a medal for The Tale of Despero, uses a natural born cynic, her words, named Florabelle, beautiful flower, that is not Florabelle, as the heroine of the story. It is a story that takes Flora's nose out of her favorite comic books, The Illuminated Adventures of the Amazing Incandesto, and into a world where the superhero is a squirrel who can write poetry and fly. There's clues in her texts through words and language to convey to her readers deeper meaning. The characters notice the beauty and wonder of everyday things. Wholly unanticipated occurrences, and are reminded of the acts of heroism often found in unassuming people or squirrels. And in this book, she also has the help from K.G. Campbell's comic book drawings. There's a lot of action in this book. Throughout the story, young people are encouraged to think about the importance of conquering their own villains, defending the defenseless, and protecting the weak, and having a capacious heart. What a great word. So that's something that has a lot more language and description that are appropriate for teachers or parents. And this is a great book for even a read aloud for parents. The next two books are new this year, and I just think that they're so important for teachers that I brought them, I'm bringing them to your attention. The first one is an autobiography picture book of Sharice's Big Voice. It's about Sharice Davids, who is a congressperson from Kansas, the first Native American and the first LGBTQ person to run for Congress from Kansas. The reason that I bring this up, and I like the book very much, is that we need as many contemporary stories about Indigenous peoples as possible. And this is very important. So I think when, you don't want to have only Native American stories that are history. You want more contemporary stories. The second one, We Are Still Here, again, is We Are Still Here, Native American Truths Everyone Should Know. And there's 12 different tribes, childlike from a classroom, presenting 12 historical and contemporary time periods, struggles and victories to their classmates. Each double page spread is one of these historical things or contemporary timepieces that we should know about. And the back matter has a lot more information about what those other 2 pages are, which is why this is really great for, to be honest, reports. Even through middle school, there's so much great information in it. But it is not a book that I think kids would understand to go to the back matter, to think about and know about what's on the 2 spreads. So teachers would be great for helping this out and really getting the kids to think about or talk about these things. So I just thought those are really important. That's why I brought them up. Do you ever get, this is for out there for anybody, do you get requests from teachers to, for books or what's out there that's new or for things to help them in their classrooms? You can unmute yourself if you want to and say something. Okay, so Tara's saying not in the last few years. All right, well, this might be something then, and this is just an aside, is these 2 books particularly, but you might want to make a bookmark for, and certain which grade levels you might know, do talk about Native Americans, Indigenous peoples, and frankly, in November, almost every grade level does. In elementary schools, especially, you might want to mention these books or just hand out something and ask to have it put in their mailboxes just so that they know about them. So that's that. Okay, next slide. All right, short talks. All right, we're talking now about the short talks for classrooms and for virtual. So this happened to have a theme. And to be honest, these 3 books were chosen out of a group of probably 10, a group of 6th graders and the middle school librarian who knows I'm better read than her, and I like to book talk, asked me to help with this. So she gave me the book titles, and they were choosing books that had to go overcoming disabilities, overcoming obstacles. So I just wanted you to hear what these are short talks. So let's start with Cynthia Lord's rules. Do you have rules that you have to follow every day? Is there a problem remembering them? Well, 12-year-old Katherine has conflicting feelings about her younger brother, David, who is autistic. Now, while she loves him, and it's shown obviously, she's embarrassed by his behavior, and she feels neglected by their parents. In an effort to help David cope with the world, she creates rules that her brother should follow, like it's okay to hug mom, but not the clerk at the video store. And please do not throw toys into the fish tank. So each chapter title is a rule, and there's lots more interspersed throughout the book. But when Katherine meets Jason, a nonverbal paraplegic who uses a book of pictures to communicate, she begins to understand that normal is difficult and perhaps unnecessary to define. Rules of behavior are less important than acceptance by others. Katherine is the narrator and tells her story with both humor and heartbreak. She loves her brother, but she's frustrated with him. And this is a story about family that revolves around a child's disability, about being different, feeling different, and finding acceptance. Okay, the next book is a baseball book, and you'd think, oh, it doesn't fit. It really does. 6 Innings by James Prowler. How many of you played in a little league team or on a little league team? Do you remember the joy or the fear? This is a suspenseful and exciting story that chronicles a championship game between 2 little league teams. You will meet every player and go through the game inning by inning. Most of the action takes place on the field and captures the game's rhythms and the routine plays, surprises, strategic moves, and the shifting momentum between the 2 teams. But there's also personalities on the team. So you'll learn about the clown and the slugger who has a burning desire to take his bat and smash it over people's heads. I mean, he doesn't, but he wants to. And the weak infielder who's absolutely terrified that maybe he has to catch the ball. There's also the game announcer who's a former student, former star. Many of you might know James Prowler from the Jigsaw Jones series. This book is way better than Jigsaw Jones. And Out of My Mind. I also want to mention that Sharon Draper has a new book this year called Out of My Heart. I haven't read it yet, but again, with the short talks, you could just do something with Sharon Draper and her books, or any of them. James Prowler has a number of books, Cynthia Lord, just choosing an author and having the books. Out of My Mind. Can you imagine what it must be like to hear and see everything around you, totally understanding, and not be able to say anything, not be able to communicate anything? Born with cerebral palsy, Melody is 10 and has never spoken a word. She's a brilliant 5th grader trapped in an uncontrollable body. Her world is enhanced by insight and intellect, but gypped by physical limitations and misunderstandings. Luckily, her family, good neighbors, and attentive aid believe in her intellect. But she has to be limited with the school resources, so she's stuck in a special classroom that shows videos of old movies and the leaders sing nursery rhymes to the kids. Her life is tragically complicated. And then she is given a computer. She learns the strengths of her thumbs, and she is able to tap on a special keyboard that lets her talk. When she is transitioned into a regular classroom, Melody's undeniable contribution enables the class to become part of a national quiz team. And the book reveals the quiet strength and fortitude it takes to overcome disabilities and the misconceptions that go with them. Kids are pretty typical in this book, and a couple are nasty and mean, but that's no more than you see in your school every day. And I loved Melody and her family too. So I would highly recommend Out of My Mind. So that's the simple thing of being able to just talk about these books. In the virtual book talks, by having these pictures up instead of holding the book, I think you have an opportunity to maybe edit it so you can edit some of you talking and then seeing these. Next slide. But what makes the best thing is these are my favorite book talks, what I call flash talks. Perfect for virtual book talks. If you like this, you'll enjoy this. In other words, it's a bookmark virtually. We all know that we cannot keep Raina Telgemeier on our shelves. These books look like shredded wheat. They're replaced over and over again. Kids love her. But what I'm surprised about is that the kids have not gone off to so many other books that are just like her or similar, or have not a similar drawing style, but a similar characters. First of all, I don't think a lot of girls and kids know about the Babysitters Club, and there's a lot in this series now. Anne Martin's old series is brought to life through Raina Telgemeier. Also, how about El Defo? It's been around for a couple years, Newbery Honor, and it talks about Cece moving from a school where there are deaf children to a new school where she will be the only hearing impaired child. She wears a rather large hearing aid right in the middle of her chest and feels very conspicuous. Will her hearing aid give her superpowers? Will she ever find a true friend? This is a memoir of the author's life navigating the hearing world. Next is Victoria Jameson. Here's Roller Girl, and next slide, All's Fair in Middle School. These are great stories about girls that don't fit in. And boys, I think, can enjoy them because I know they enjoyed Raina Telgemeier too. These are well drawn and funny. I didn't know a thing about roller derby sports or the Renaissance Fair, but I love these books. I think there are stories where there are girls that you'll care about them. And Stargazing by Jen Wang. I was actually quite amazed by this book. I loved it. Moon and Christine are becoming best friends. Moon is very different from Christine, although they both grew up in the same Chinese American suburb. They share their favorite music videos, painting their nails, and Moon even tells Christine her secret, that she has visions sometimes. Sadly, Moon's visions are related to a medical reason, and soon Christine's best friend is in the hospital fighting for her life. Can Christine be the friend Moon needs now, when the sky is falling on her? This friendship story is at times joyful, heart-wrenching, and full of hope. And the last book I want to talk about is To Dance. And this is a memoir of the author, Sienna Sherson Siegel, and the artwork is by her husband, Mark Siegel. It's a loving tribute to learning to dance from 6 years old on up. This was also a Cyber Honor Award many years ago. Let's turn the page, or next page. This is the wonderful thing about putting up some scenes from books, because you can show pictures. I don't want you to read these. You don't want kids to be able to read them. I want them to see overall the whole look. And when I say that her dreams keep her skipping and leaping and circling and spinning from her home in Puerto Rico to dance class in Boston's New York City Ballet, I'm hoping that, and I can even point out, look at like the ribbon that goes across the page, the swan up in the top of The other page has got such movement into it, and the music notes that are around her body. It's it's actually a really beautiful story, and it's a very short book. Does Sienna make it as a ballerina? Well, you need to read the book to find out, but let me simply state that her years of hard work in ballet are part of her life for always. And yes, you've heard it before, but yes, this is one of my favorite books. All right, more about pictures. What else can we do virtually with pictures? Next slide. Nonfiction that has pictures, obviously. Okay, I can tell you that the notorious Benedict Arnold didn't have pictures, so no, that's not going to work. But Shipwreck at the Bottom of the World does, by Jennifer Armstrong. This is the incredible survival saga of explorer Ernest Shackleton. Now, if I did this in person, I would read the first page or a little part of it, but you really shouldn't be reading anything except longer than a line. I mean, a line only from these books. I did leave a link for you about all of this for fair use. And these pictures for Shipwreck at the Bottom of the World are in the book, but they're also in museums. So I believe that they've been all over the place. You can put those up. And some of the pictures for all 13 sitting next to it, one of them I found on the internet it was a great picture of all 13 of the people who were stuck in the cave, the kids and the coach, and underneath it is a National Geographic. So really I should have had where I got these pictures from underneath here. But I just wanted to mention that these are all pictures that I felt were absolutely correct in having them up here. So back to Shipwreck at the Bottom of the World. So a crew of 27 attempts to cross the Antarctic Ocean in 1914 and ended up trapped in their ship in the ice pack. So they're actually in the ocean, but in the Antarctic Ocean, they are now is frozen in. And the ice pack moves and shifts as it gets colder and colder. In other words, it crushes the ship. So all 27 have to leave their ship. Now they had brought with them other smaller boats, which they now have to put on skis and make them like sleighs and manually try and move them across this pack ice. And it's not smooth. It's up and it's down, it's waves. It's miserable life. They live on these ice floes for 5 months. Finally, they get out to an island and they are not rescued for 2 years. And the only way anyone knows them that they are there is across an 800 open boat. 4 of the men, including Shackleton, get in this boat with only one small instrument to measure where they're going and have to cross this 800 open water. There've never been another like this open boat crossing where they've crossed to get to Georgia Island in a whaling station to get the help they need. It's unbelievable story. It's enhanced by the pictures of Frank Hurley, which are gorgeous. And I can't imagine anyone not loving this book. Such an action-packed adventure story. As is all 13, the incredible cave rescue of the Thai boys soccer team. This was a team of 12 boys and their coach, and they'd had a practice. And what they did is they would normally, if they are going to finish early, they actually decide, well, we're going to have a little side trip or a picnic, or we'll do something as a team. It was very great in team building, and they were a very cohesive team. So they had decided they were going to go to this cave the coach was going to bring them to. They got snacks and they had water, and they had a couple of them had flashlights, and they biked over to the cave entrance, which wasn't far from where they were practicing. And they went in. They went a little further than they expected, but they all were going to be celebrating one of their friends' birthday parties at his house. So they knew when it was time to turn around to get out, but it was an amazing sight. And as they turned around to go out, they did not know it had been raining outside. And the rain is pouring. In fact, the water in the cave is too deep for them to walk through, and they don't know how to swim. At home now, people are looking around, where are these kids? And it's raining, and yes, it's raining hard. So they decide to look for them, of course, and they find the bikes outside the cave. It took 18 days to rescue them. The rescue attempt incorporated people from around the world, from cave explorers to underwater divers, trying to get them food. And how were they going to get them out during this monsoon rain that had flooded the front of the cave? The only way out. This is a STEM story. The imagination of what these scientists had to build to get the boys out. It's exciting. It's a page turner. Yes, I'm going to tell you, it's in the title. It's an incredible cave rescue. Yes, you know they're all going to make it. But how? And that's why I say with virtual, you can add a lot of pictures and find a lot of things that you can show as you're talking about these books. All right, next slide. I just talked a lot about action, adventure, thrillers. Well, sometimes it's the characters that make the difference. Prairie Lotus by Linda Sue Park is a book that makes you think about Little House on the Prairie, or The Birch Bark House by Louise Erdrich. So it's definitely historical fiction, and it's for kids who might like books about the West and exploration. But you don't need to have read any of those other books to enjoy this story of Hannah, whose late mother immigrated from China and married a white man. Now in 1880 in the Dakota Territory, maybe they can put down some roots, because Hannah's father has moved them from place to place as he's gotten jobs. She never gets to go to school, although her father has taught her to read and work with numbers. And she has been instilled with the skill that her mother had, which was a seamstress. Perhaps she's a little more outspoken than women who at that time might have been. But I also felt that the situations she's in really felt real. I don't know anything about the 1880 Dakota Territory, so what do I know if it's right or wrong? Only what I have read about in books, and what I've seen here, and what Laura Ingalls Wilder made me think about. For instance, the fact that Laura Ingalls was thoughtful, kind, and self-reliant. And so is Hannah. All right, now, this is a nonfiction, but it also is a character study in the notorious Benedict Arnold. How many of you have heard about Benedict Arnold? What do you remember in just a couple of words? Oh, I bet I can hear it. Yes, you were right if you said traitor. It's true, but there's so much more to this actual Revolutionary War hero. Yes, war hero. Had he been killed at the Battle of Saratoga, there'd probably be a monument there now. He'd been one of the greatest heroes of American history, and we'd celebrate his life as we do many others. Instead, he survived and went on to betray the colonies and die in shame. This is a brilliant, fast-paced biography that reads like an adventure novel and shows the real Arnold and all of his characteristics. He was reckless. He was heroic. He was driven. He wasn't a whiner, but he did feel that he was always being denied upward mobility. So the book opens with the hanging of Major Andre, the British officer who plotted with Arnold to turn West Point over to the British. And the story sticks to the exciting illustrative scenes of Arnold's career: the invasion of Canada, the assembling of America's first naval fleet, and the Battle of Valcour Island, the Battle of Saratoga, and the plot with Andre, whose parallel narrative ends in a bungled mission, his execution, and Benedict Arnold's dishonor. Highly, highly readable. I don't think you'd go wrong with this. Okay, so yeah, I did bring up another adventure story, but it really does talk about the character of Arnold. So those are two characters. How about, next slide, anecdotes, episodes, or short stories? I've put these together and to show how you really, okay, this is one where you don't have to read every single page and every single story. pick out something so that you can talk about the ones you like, because I've always told kids, you don't have to read the whole book when you have multiple short stories. You're not going to like them all. You might not like all the authors, but pick out what you like, and that's fine. So with Boots on the Ground, yeah, I did read it all. Elizabeth Partridge. This is a YA book on America's war in Vietnam. Lots of great pictures, but rather than offering a history of the causes and effects of the Vietnam War, Elizabeth Partridge brings the conflict to a personal level with accounts of 8 men, 2 women, 4 US presidents, Martin Luther King Jr. and Maya Lin, who built the monument to the Vietnam Memorial. Chapter by chapter, the author introduces different people. And one chapter is on Green Beret David Oshiro from Hawaii. He grew up in a small town in Hawaii speaking Hawaiian Pidgin, which is kind of a mashup of many languages, and running around the fields of sugarcane wearing no shoes, just enjoying being a kid. He was drafted and decided to enlist for 3 years because they told him if he did, he probably wouldn't go to Vietnam. He was very intimidated by basic training because they were using dummies that really looked just like him with his Asian looking face for bayonet training, and watching fellow soldiers taking their bayonets into the dummy going, kill, kill. He wasn't sent to Vietnam as he'd been promised, but he got so bored with his job of packing parachutes that he decided to sign up and get out of the Army faster. Over in Vietnam, while lying in wait for a medic to fly him out of battle zone, he was almost left on the ground because of his face, because of what he looked like. People thought he was the enemy, not his immediate troops, but if people didn't know him, they didn't see that. He never felt safe, but he made it. And his story, as are the others, are very popular. Now, I don't have a book talk for Guys Read. I think you all are very familiar with Guys Read. This one I just pulled out for the picture. Funny business. My God, this sells itself because it's John Jessica. But I just wanted to put that up there because we have so many short story collections that don't go out. And, you know, for some people who don't like to read a lot, it's the perfect answer. Just So Stories. Oh, that sells itself by just the titles of some of the stories in there, from The Elephant's Child to How the Camel Got His Hump, and many others like it. But they're all funny and silly. They're also great read-alouds. Not Boots on the Ground, but the other 3 would make great read-alouds for parents. And as for Black Boy Joy, to be honest, I started the first story and I didn't really like it. But when I got to Jason Reynolds' First Day Fly, charming, because he follows a child who's excitedly getting ready for his actual first day of school, and he's meticulously preparing it. And he asks his mother to iron his jeans because she's the best ironer you've ever known. Princess Press Iron Woman. She can turn wrinkled fabric into something like thinly sliced pieces of wood. The boy's delight in going to school is actually Jason Reynolds. He and his mother very proud to send him off to school and for him to go to school. Now, the book also has a comic in it by Jerry Craft. Remember New Kid? That's Jerry Craft. And it's called Embracing My Black Boy Joy. And it's about a loving family and community as he speaks freely about the beautiful moments inside that the outside world refuses to acknowledge. People who don't seem to want to see their joy will make us show it even more. So I think that these books really lend themselves to just talking about a chapter or one of the stories, not all of them. Next slide. We get to theme-based, which again is like the flash talks, but these, because people wouldn't know these, you'd have to talk a little bit more about them. This picture book biography, I have 5 books here, and you know you have so many in your collection. They are so good, from the artwork to honestly great for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade assignments. So teachers should know about them too. And we have great collections. The Girl Who Drew Butterflies, How Maria Marion's Art Changed Science by Joyce Sidman she was considered the first ecologist in the 17th century, means that she lived in the 1600s. She had art in her background, family artists, and she was an artist too. She loved to draw and follow the insects. So she had sketchbooks of insects, including having a complete life cycle of a butterfly. But scientists believed that back then in the 1600s that somehow butterflies just were born. I don't know. They just come out. But nobody believed from her drawings that they actually came from caterpillars. She was a scientist and an artist. I was most impressed with the fact that, can you see on the cover of her, she looks, dressed in clothes from the period. So you're talking a lot of clothing, long skirts, stockings, shoes. She went to Suriname. She's from the Netherlands, and Netherlands was a colonial power to the South American country, Suriname, to study the beautiful insects and butterflies and everything else. And she was going in the jungle dressed as she normally would. I mean, amazing. So beautiful biography. All right. How to Build a Hug. Temple Grandin's story about her amazing squeeze machine. Temple Grandin has issues with sensory, which a lot of kids have, who are on the Asperger's range. And she wanted to be touched and held, but she couldn't stand to be touched and held. She didn't know what she was supposed to do. So she lived on a farm, and she watched when the vet came to work with the cows, and they put the cows into a squeeze machine, which is what she called it. And then the vet could work on the cows and they wouldn't get upset. And so she literally built her own squeeze machine that she used to give herself hugs. I mean, eventually she outgrew this and allowed people to hug her, but she couldn't in the beginning have that happen. Really wonderful relationship with her mother, and she's a brilliant scientist and professor. Okay, King of Ragtime by Scott Joplin is the story of Scott Joplin, but he was living in the 1800s, and he is the one who wrote Maple Leaf Rag and a lot of other rags. So why is he called the King of Ragtime? Well, it's because his piece, The Maple Leaf Rag, was published. And for an African American to get his music published was fantastic. So he really is considered the King of Ragtime because they have this piece of work, not something he just played on the piano and other people copied. It's his work. It's short, but the artwork is gorgeous. Stephen Constanza wrote that. Counting on Katherine. We know the story of Katherine Johnson from Hidden Figures, the movie, and this tells this biography of a girl who's brilliant in math and how she got up to the work as a NASA computer, meaning a mathematician, and eventually helped out on the Apollo 11, Mercury missions, Apollo 13. It's a lovely picture book biography. And Nina Simone, who lent her voice to civil rights, started out as a classical musician and changed when she was not given the opportunity to study after Juilliard at the Carnegie Mellon Institute for Music. And it kind of changed the way she thought about what her opportunities were and what was offered to her. So picture book biographies makes great, quick, flash book talks. Next. And to finish it off, these are the books you don't have to read. It's kind of funny. But the Guinness Book of World Records, Poop Happened, which sounds like a terrible book, but it really is funny. And it is the history of excrement and how to get rid of it, and eyewitness books. So you don't have to read these. You just have to tell people how funny they are. To be honest, Poop Happened works really well if you want to read a small section, but you can't for virtual. So there's a new book out about the London sewer system, which is a picture book biography of the guy who made that. So you can put those two together, but you don't have to read these, but you really do have to remind kids of where they are because they don't really browse the nonfiction unless they're looking for dinosaurs. So that's where book talking can take you. And I hope that there's some hints here that will help you with doing it virtually, along with remembering that you're always book talking when you got families and kids at the library. And that's it. Any questions? Any chats? Any thoughts?
I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all see each other a little bit more. And their questions have not come up in the chat throughout the presentation, but again, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask your question out loud or type it into the chat. And while folks are typing or digesting, I just want to remind everyone to keep an eye out after the presentation. I will send out an evaluation. Also, when the recording link is ready, I will send that out to all registrants as well. Just want to thank you. My to read pile just grew a lot.
That's good. How many of you are book talking? How's that? I'll ask the question. All right. I only see one hand because everybody else, you've stopped your video, but okay. Well, I really hope that you are. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I mean, I used to stand in the shelves and open up and look at the book jacket to remind me names of characters or something, and all of a sudden something would spark for one, just a couple of sentences. The flash talks. I just love flash talks, to be honest. Then I send a kid home with a pile of book and they look at me and I was like, you don't have to read them all. Just start them and see if any of them strike your fancy. In the stacks. That's great. That's, to me, that's so much fun. Walking up to somebody and saying, you look like you're having trouble finding anything, favorite books and the thing is, you don't have to read everything that comes out, because you've got all the back things that you've read and they're on the shelf and people forget them. Anyway. How many of you keep lists of books that you read? Oh, Mike, thank you.
Mike commented that taking notes in Excel is a good idea.
Good. Thank you, Connie. Yes, you really have to keep up with that. It's awful, but you make it so short. Yeah, it's easy. And the thing about Excel is I don't know how to do the math formulas when you use it for really, like my husband uses it. I just use it for the sorting. That's it. So I don't even have to really know how to use Excel. That's the thing. Yes, a lot of people do use Goodreads. I don't, but a lot of people do. And keep their lists, their wish lists, everything. And that's okay. If it works for you, excellent.
Before we started, we were chatting and Joyce asked what I was reading. And I thought, oh man, this is exactly what happens. You asked what I'm reading and I forgot everything. So it does happen.
Yes, it does. That's okay. Actually, I always kind of want to remember because kids will ask me. So, the kids will ask what you're reading. So
Lisa keeps her library card account list.
Oh, okay. Can you do that? I don't know. I imagine I would never think of that.
We have an opt-in
Okay.
version. So if you would like, you can ask for your checkout history to be saved.
Oh, okay. Okay. Great.
Does anyone else have any questions about book talking, about virtual book talking? Anything else? Yes, Beth said hard to remember since we're usually reading more than one book at a time.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. My husband thinks that my nightstand's going to fall down one day just because of the stack of books on it.
Books can become the nightstand.
That's right. That's right.
A question, what are the copyright rules of book talking virtually?
I honestly do not know, but I gave you a link that had the fair use of it. Not book talking specifically, but more like book reviews, but what you could put up or not put up. And that's where I found that you could not read If it's going to stay up, you really can't read. I didn't find anything about pictures, but again, I'm not having, when I put up those pictures of the graphic novels, it's more of a, you get a feel for it. And the pictures from the nonfiction books, you can find pictures on the internet, obviously, for a lot of things that are up there anyway. I'm sorry, but I'm going to say that, sure, it may not be perfectly perfect, but they're up there. Like the National Geographic, if you say it's from National Geographic, it was on their website. So it's got to be, as far as I'm concerned, as long as it's attributed, it shouldn't be a problem. But you really can't read. That's why the story times that people are doing nowadays can't stay up for very long, or they have to be, people have to opt in to see them, so that, because you're reading books, you're absolutely reading books and story time. And those, it was very nice. A lot of publishers was great during the beginning of the pandemic, but they've had, that's like, no, not anymore. But you can, School Library Journal has great copyright blog. And frankly, I put a lot of questions into that and see what comes up when I do a Google search on the copyright SLJ blog. I'll just put in those terms. All right.
We do have that School Library Journal blog and a few other resources linked on a LibGuide on the RCLS website. So when I send out the follow-up email, I can include that link for everyone.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thanks for joining today. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. And thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.